Welcome, one and all, to the latest edition of Signals from Mars. We are pre recording this episode to help fill in for some of these summer episodes so that you guys aren't left hanging. Joining me today is the one and only metalhead, Ed Ferguson. How are you, sir?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing well myself. So, we've got a few topics we're going to talk about today. Um, Mainly, we're going to start to talk about the state of hard rock and metal in 2024. We talk about this from time to time with bands and, well, economics. Bands, new followers, us old farts that are still following bands, stuff like that, being priced out for things. So, first, let's talk about there was recent news where big name artists, I mean, Jennifer Lopez is a big name
Yeah.
artist across the board. She's a pop artist. She's in movies. Um, I mean, huger than most metal acts.
Mhm.
She's had to cancel a tour. The Black Keys, who are a fairly well-known rock band, same thing. They've canceled an
Mhm.
entire arena tour. I know that a lot of these bands are talking about, well, it's COVID, it's, what's come after COVID and the price has gone up and so on and so forth. And I'm not saying that's not true, but how much does the reality of the state of some of these bands come into play? I mean, we've seen it with hard rock and metal. We've talked about this at length. You have bands like a Motley Crue and a Def Leppard, which are big bands, but they can't sell out arenas or stadiums unless Def Leppard, for example, is going out with Journey.
Mhm.
And they've got a third band playing with them, which slips my mind right now. A lot of these bands are going out. Judas Priest is going out with Saxon and Uriah Heep. Um,
Mhm.
so it's not them headlining on their own. Do you think that some of these bands are kind of biting off more than they can chew, and kind of maybe them or their management are kind of lost on what the reality or the interest for these bands are, in 2024?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like it. Everything seems kind of up in the air right now, and everyone's trying to figure it out. And there seems to be, a lot of, backlash too, like with the Jennifer Lopez case, because you have things like TikTok where people are sharing things more than ever, and just all of the hatred that people have had towards her is just easily displayed all day every day on platforms like TikTok, and you can tell it's changing society's feelings about her as a whole, almost
Right.
to the point to where she's kind of ruined it for herself, and now people aren't buying tickets. Yeah, there's everything is different right now, and a lot of people probably don't know what they're doing or what to do about it. Now, the Black Keys, they had an excuse that sounded pretty good. Do you remember reading their response to that? Or they were claiming it wasn't because of ticket sales. They said they were going to take those resources and put it towards something else, but they could be making that up to save face too.
Right. Well,
Did you hear them say that?
I did not. I mean, I'm not a close follower of theirs, but I mean, we've
Yeah.
seen bands like Anthrax do this in the UK, for example.
Hmm.
And I mean, a lot of it, I think, is them wanting, how do I say this? Wanting to not upset their fans. In the case of, say, an Anthrax or maybe a Judas Priest, who in the past I've talked to Mark Striegel about this, how maybe they had oversaturated the market. and under
Mhm.
the fact that if you're playing the same exact set list, you need
Yes.
something else to get people to come out. If you play
Especially for metal fans.
right, who are diehard fans that enjoy deep album cuts. And I
Exactly.
get it that Anthrax said, "Well, you don't understand. We played Among the Living, and when we got to some of the deeper tracks, people weren't into those tracks as much."
Mhm.
Okay, I get that, but that doesn't mean, for example, that Skeleton in the Closet is going to get the same reaction as, I don't know, playing Medusa or playing
Yeah,
Dangerous.
that's right.
You know,
Yeah, because even if it's a band that you love, if they're just playing the same stuff year after year, you don't really care to see them, every 10 years maybe.
right?
It's for me, like if even with Slayer, if they're playing the same stuff all the time, I just wouldn't want to go and stand there and watch the same songs all the time. It'd
Right.
be like every, 5 to 10 years, I'd be good to go see it. And that's about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the thing is, the tickets aren't cheap. I mean, if we're talking about, which is something
Mhm.
else that I intended on discussing, the prices of tickets. If we're talking about this being a $35 ticket, then you say, all right, well, maybe. But if you're
Mhm.
if you're paying $180 per ticket, then
Mhm.
you say, well, look at that. They've only switched out one song, and the only song that they've switched out is the one off of the new album for one off of
Mhm.
the previous album. And you're like,
Mhm.
okay, that's not enough to get me to see them. Um,
Yeah.
in a lot,
That's luckily not been as big of a problem for me because I don't really care to see shows in arenas anyway.
right?
I've always much preferred the club setting. And so far, I haven't had to pay super big ticket prices, at the clubs downtown. Or if you go to Cincinnati to Bogarts or Louisville, you can pay probably more like $30 to go to a show.
Okay,
When I went to see The Last in Line, I can't remember what I paid, but it wasn't so much that I remember it. It was a good price.
right.
But they're just playing at one of our clubs downtown too. Nothing too big.
Yeah, the other thing with that is, for example, is a discussion in my household this week where I mentioned, hey, we just saw Marky Ramone in May. He's coming
Mhm.
back in November. It's $35 to see him. We paid $35 this time. And I said, is that a price point where it makes sense to see him again?
Mhm.
Even though it's going to be more or less the same set list, was it fun enough that we want to
Mhm.
experience that again? And the discussion was going back and forth with that. Now we're heading over to the States, and while we're there are a few shows. There are some at
Mhm.
amphitheaters, and there are some at stadiums. And for example, I priced out going to see Green Day. I'm not the hugest Green Day fan, but I figured, okay, while we're there to, give my kids that experience,
Mhm.
let's see what it costs. So I checked out the price at Citi Field in New York, and it was $180 for the last row of a 70,000 seat stadium.
Yeah, that's even what Blink 182 were charging for seats, and they're not even as big as Green Day.
That's Green Day. Yeah, yeah. And the thing too is we had an option. We could see them at Hershey Stadium, which is about 3 hours south.
Yeah.
Again, it was $135, and it's all the way in the back of that old stadium that they have there. And I'm thinking, I thought about it, and I'm like, I like them. I think they would be cool to see live once, probably. But
Yeah.
does the price point make me want to go? Um,
Yeah.
Def Leppard and
What are they doing for that extra $80 you're spending over what it's probably really worth? I mean, they're not putting on shows like Kiss, are they? They're just
they are playing Rock and Roll All Night now in their
Green Day.
Yeah, Green Day is.
Oh no, I don't want to hear that.
Surprisingly enough, Billy Joe Armstrong has a cover band.
Yeah.
And he covered, who did he just cover? It was a song by Rat, or it wasn't Rat, but it was somewhere along those lines. It was an 80s hard rock metal song, and
Okay.
he pulled the solo off. He actually did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was surprised. I'm like, holy shit, wasn't what I expected.
That's cool.
I figured he'd just play like a few bar chords or whatnot. But yeah, and I've seen interviews with him talk about how he's an overall music junkie of all different types of genres. So
yeah,
kind of cool. No, you know what it was? It was Van Halen. He played a Van Halen song, and he played the
well, that's cool.
It was shit, and it was now it's coming back to me. It's slowly in my old man brain. It's coming back. It was with Michael Anthony. I think they did Somebody Get Me a Doctor, or one of these tracks where Michael Anthony did heavy backing vocals and has done live with Van Halen in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy Joe did the solo note for note, the Van Halen.
Wow.
Solo. So
yeah, he's definitely a talented guy.
Yeah.
And can write some good songs.
Yeah. So
he's got what it takes. But to spend that kind of money to watch a pop punk band whose songs you hear all the time. Yeah, I don't know, unless if I had a grandchild that was just dying to have that experience. You know, this granddaughter that I have, I'd probably spend all the money in the world on her if she asked me to take her.
Right.
But that'd be the only reason I would.
Yeah, well, same boat I'm in, taking my son to see Limp Bizkit. But yeah, still with Limp Bizkit, there were tickets ranging from 300 something going all the way down to like 25 for lawn seats. We paid around 200 for 2 tickets. Because I wanted to get something that was, I could have gone cheaper, but we had an obstructed view.
Yeah, you don't want that.
And I don't want that experience.
Especially when you come all the way over here to see it.
Yeah, exactly. So I figured, all right, this may be the only show we see. So I'll pay a little more than what I want to pay for it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And
it's something you'll share with your kids too.
Right. And that's the whole thing. There are other shows that we looked at. We looked at Def Leppard and Journey, which were similar prices to Green Day. I looked at Bush, Jerry Cantrell, and Candlebox are coming around as a package deal. The same amphitheater, and the tickets are slightly less than the Limp Bizkit package. It's only 3 bands versus I think it's 5 for Limp Bizkit.
Wow. See, that's another problem I have with going to shows, especially with a lot of the bands that I like in the metalcore, hardcore, other metal bands. When they come around, there'll be 3 to 5 bands.
Right.
And it's just, I have a hard time with that. Number one, it's hard for me to sit through all of that or stand through all of that on a concrete floor.
Right.
But then, you also, I don't know, it's just too much changing going on. I'd rather just have a couple of bands like there always was when we were younger, so that, you can dig into their music a little better. Especially when they have more than 3 bands, and they're also busy trying to get up there and play a few songs, change their equipment, and do it over again with another band. It's just, it's just not for me.
Yeah. Well, here's another thing that that I wanted to discuss is some of these festivals where you have a lot of bands playing on a specific day. And it reminds me a lot of these memes that you see online where it says, okay, you have $25 and you can pick 4 bands. And at each tier, this is what each band is worth. And for some of the festivals that I've been seeing, it's almost like they spend those 25 on two bands that are worth, 10,
Yeah.
and then everything else are $1 bands. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you an example here. So this is the this is a festival that is close to me. This is about 2 hours away. And all right, so they've got some known commodities here. Okay, so the headliner of night one is Jane's Addiction. Second band on the tier is Ty Sabal. I don't know who that is.
Me
Third
neither.
is a Spanish band. Fourth and fifth are Bonafide and Whispering Sons. Then Brigade Loco and a bunch of local bands. The following day, it's Queens of the Stone Age with L7.
That'd be a bigger show.
Red Cross is there. There's another Spanish band that I know, but I only know of them because they're signed to Century Media. It's a female duo. And I don't know any of the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 bands that day.
It's a
I know
lot.
4 bands out of
Yeah.
22.
I assume they're playing simultaneously in different spots, right?
Correct. They've got
Yeah.
3 different stages going on.
Yeah.
The third night, Band of Horses is headlining. Band of Horses played a small bar.
That's
Close.
an indie band, right?
What's that?
That's an indie rock band, right?
Correct.
Band of Horses.
Yeah, them. Okay, Sheryl Crow is playing that night.
Wow, the music has changed here.
Yeah. Mavis Staples, who I believe is kind of like a soul throwback singer. The Warren Haynes Band. Let's see, who else do I know here? I've heard of the Detroit Cobras, but I couldn't tell you one of their songs. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 other bands that I have no idea who they are. So it comes back to they've got one huge band, one medium-sized band, maybe, because I mean L7 was known. I mean, they were never huge. So, and that's what's driving tickets that day. Queens of the Stone Age, L7. The previous night, I would say, is just Jane's Addiction. And that final night, Band of Horses and Sheryl Crow have even billing there. So,
yeah, that is. I didn't go to a lot of festivals, but when I did, I feel like, I mean, they would have, a main stage with the bigger bands, of course, but the other bands that were there were still, they had their audiences, their fans. They were pretty well known. And when you went to the festival, there was so many bands, good bands that you wanted to see, you can't get to see them all. Sometimes you have to choose between one or the other, or run back and forth between tents. I don't remember, ever going to a festival and being like that, to where there's so many bands you just haven't heard of. Now, of course, sometimes we'll have like a new band stage, and people can sign up with their bands to go and play so people can hear them. But now it sounds like you have a whole festival with a bunch of new band stages.
Okay, so this is the biggest metal festival in Spain. This is taking place next week. So Let me go from the smallest stage all the way up to the headlining stage. Okay, so they have 1, 2, 3, 4 stages going on. All right, let me just go by bands that I know here. So on the smallest stage, you've got Bocasa, who I've posted within Patreon, and you've got Nashville Pussy, who's recently toured Spain. The second stage has Biohazard with the original lineup, plus Comeback Kid, who I know of, and then a bunch of bands that I'm not sure of. The next to biggest stage has Sum 41 on their final tour, and that's the only band that I know there. The big stage for Wednesday is Alice Cooper, Machine Head, Bad Omens, and Kerry King.
Nice.
So that at least you know what's going on there.
Yeah.
All right, second day. This is a 4-day festival. You have small stages, or it's called the desert stage. It's High on Fire, Royal Thunder, the Lizards, who's
Yeah, I've
kind of
heard
a
of them.
local stoner band. Oh no, that's not the Lizards. That's the Wizards. I'm sorry. The Chaos stage. You have no one that I know of. Ritual stage has Ishan, Ern, Crypta, a death metal band whose name is like 14 letters long, and I've never been able to. And then the main stage is Bring Me the Horizon, Bruce Dickinson, and Delane, and then a few other bands that I've never heard of.
I'd like to see Earn. Those videos you posted turned me on to a couple of their records. They have one or two, can't remember, but very good band.
Cool.
I hope they'll gain some more fans playing there.
Let's hope.
Mm-hmm. That's the reason they go, I'm sure.
Yeah. Desert stage. I've never really heard of any of those bands. Chaos stage. There's a Spanish band that I've heard of who's actually playing on that other festival that I mentioned, Death Before Dishonor, which is I believe they're a hardcore band out of Boston. The Ritual stage has Accept on it. That's the only thing that I really know of there. And then the main stage has The Offspring and Corey Taylor. And then the rest are national bands from here. Saturday, the last day of the festival, the desert stage has Empire State Bastard, which has Dave Lombardo.
Yeah, that's a good band.
Green Lung, who I've recently featured on Patreon, and Chemist, who's a band that I have on vinyl and who I've featured on Patreon in the past. The Chaos stage has Cro-Mags, Zulu, and I don't recognize any of the others. Ritual stage has Fear Factory and Fintroll, who's I get bombarded with their stuff, but they're more of a pagan band, which for the most part never goes over well on Patreon.
Yeah.
And the headliners are Avenged Sevenfold, Megadeth, Electric Callboy, and Baby Metal. And actually, Slaughter to Prevail is actually playing that day as well. So this is a flat out metal festival. The names are bigger. But I'm assuming that a lot of these bands, the price point to get them to play is probably not all that much. Nashville Pussy recently played the same place where I saw Marky Ramone, and they were charging $30 to see them. Except I can't imagine that Accept is asking for a whole heck of a lot. And in these states, they're playing theaters. They're not playing, if they're playing an amphitheater, they're packaged with somebody else.
Yeah.
Fear Factory at this point is that. Biohazard at this point is that. So, I mean, yeah, more bang for your buck with this. But again, it comes down to money, I think, to bring some of these bands on board. And the other thing, too, is that This is a homegrown festival that grew from nothing basically and is the
Uh-huh.
biggest metal festival in Spain, whereas the other festival
Hmm.
is born out of a corporation who I've
Yeah.
gotten to see other festivals from, which aren't run well. The grounds always suck, um, and they're never friendly with anyone. I mean, I just don't get it. So okay, so 4-day tickets to this festival is $200. So it's
Wow.
$50 a day. If you buy individual tickets, it's 79 it's excuse me, it's $70 more or less, except Saturday is $80.
Right. Yeah, that's going to make more sense going to a festival for a day.
Yeah. But so let's get back to what what we're talking about with the economics and bands maybe realizing that. I mean, a festival, I get it. If a festival, I've always said this. There's so much money to throw around with some of them that
Hmm.
for a band like a Motley Crue, like a Twisted Sister, to say, "Oh, we're never playing again," I think is asinine, because a
Yeah.
festival promoter comes along 10 years after you stop playing and says, "Here's $1 million to play my festival,"
Yeah.
and you're playing the festival.
Hmm.
The case for touring, though, with these bands playing theaters, playing big theaters, and not selling well, or going to arenas and having to tie off areas of the arena.
Hmm.
um I mean, do bands just not understand their worth in 2024? Because I would think that before planning a tour, and this is just out of complete ignorance that I'm throwing this out there,
Hmm.
you have to know the expenses involved. you know
Yeah.
does a manager say, hey, last album was 5 years ago,
Hmm.
it sold this much, tickets sold this much, we did all penthouse hotels,
Hmm.
it cost us this much. Okay, this
Hmm.
album isn't selling as much, it isn't being streamed as much, so instead of the penthouse, we're gonna have to look at really nice five-star hotels.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to cut back, and instead of playing stadiums with huge pockets being cordoned off, we're gonna play large theaters now. Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna play a 5,000 seat theater, which we're gonna fill, as opposed
Exactly.
yeah, as opposed to
That's what
doing
they should do.
yeah, which is what I think what some of these bands aren't doing. And again, I can have members of bands who know this better than I do say, no, it's not that simple.
Hmm.
But I've also talked to people in the past. I've talked to Tommy Victor from Prong, who told me that they tour basically based on the statistics that they receive from Spotify. And based
Yeah.
on those statistics, they see where people are listening and where they should be playing, as
Hmm.
opposed to just routing through Decatur, Illinois,
Yeah.
when nobody's listening to them out there.
Yeah. That is a good idea.
So our
Although some bands may not come through a town like Lexington if they all did that, because we can, we're starting to have more of a metal scene than we did growing up,
right.
and bands like Anvil came through, but yeah, not a lot of people show up. Um, so yeah, you could see a lot of bands, skipping over even towns like mine if they did that too much.
Mhm.
But I can also see why they would.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the past too has been kind of shoehorning into certain places just because they were on the way.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is just me speaking out of ignorance. Maybe that's costing them more money than it is just to drive on through a town and get to someplace else where instead of just selling 50 tickets in a certain city, well, maybe they
Yeah,
can drive an hour or two more and they can sell 200. And maybe that's
that's
not
right.
the number that they want,
You're
but
right. That's exactly probably what they sold at that Anvil show that I went to here in Lexington. It seemed like there was about 50 people there. And I felt bad for them, but they all still, they had a good attitude and put on a good show. And but if they had just gone an hour further north to Cincinnati,
mhm.
like Bogarts, or even in northern Kentucky, they would have had at least twice the size of that crowd, probably, if not more.
Well,
But thank you for giving us a shot and coming to see us.
here's another thing too, and maybe their last few tours they have played Bogarts, and maybe playing there gives them less of a cut than them playing in Lexington. So
It
maybe
definitely would. Yeah,
paying for or playing in front of 50 people actually gets them more money than playing in front of, I keep
Mhm.
tripping
That's a good point.
playing. Maybe
Yeah,
going to Bogarts, they have to pay more to rent that venue,
that's right.
show up there.
Yeah, if you only get another 50 people, you might spend all that money on Bogarts.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Gene Simmons recently discussed was him getting more money out of doing solo dates
Mm-hmm.
than when he was playing with Kiss. And he said, well, I'm not taking a 60 member crew out. I'm not renting 8 semi trucks. I'm not paying, hotels for this. We're not taking this gear. We're playing rented gear everywhere. We're just
Mm-hmm.
flying in and they're paying for our hotel and airplane and we're
Sounds
making,
nice.
yeah. So again, that's why for a lot of these bands to say, "Oh, well, we're never going to play again," is asinine
Mhm.
because at a festival, they can make a lot more money out of it as a result because of being able to make those kind of deals.
Yeah, sure.
Pricing
Yeah.
kids pricing kids out of shows. And we talked a little bit about this a few days ago. I don't remember if we did it during a podcast or kind of behind the scenes. When we were growing up, you could have a $20 ticket night where there were a bunch of bands that you didn't know who they were. You kind of
Mhm.
knew the headliner, you at least heard the band's name. There was maybe a local act and then 2 to 3 other bands that were coming around touring. But
Mhm.
it was 20 bucks, or if not, you had $5 ticket night where it was discover a new band and it was for
Yeah,
5 bucks. So when we were kids, you were able to see shows based on your allowance or based on
yeah,
it not making you go out of your way or paying $200 for a
that's
ticket.
right. Yeah, I could mow 2 yards for $10 a piece. Remember, this is back in the '80s, so that's all you're going to get. $10 if you're lucky. Five for sure, but maybe 10. You could mow 2 yards and then go see Slayer in Cincinnati on the South of Heaven tour for 1850.
There you
And
go.
in the early '90s, when I saw bands like Agnostic Front and Obituary and some things like that, it probably was in the low 20s,
Mhm.
2150 or something. So yeah, big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and that to me has to affect once again the music going audience. It has to affect kids getting involved and wanting to check
Mhm.
out bands. It has to involve older people like us that are thinking, well, hell, in my case, I'm buying 4 tickets, excuse me. Um, there's a big difference between paying again 20 bucks for 4 tickets paying $400 to $500 for 4 tickets.
Yeah.
So,
I don't see how any, middle class or less kid pays for shows like that.
right. And I think that there's a lot that's being pointed at the streaming services, for example, and they're saying, well, we're not making money off of this, so we have to make up money somewhere else.
Hmm.
I don't doubt that, but at the same time, it seems like fans are being gouged to an extent.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have even asked for that as a Christmas gift because my parents wouldn't even spend that much money, you know, on Christmas. They wouldn't have spent, over $100 for each of his kids or something.
Yeah.
It's just amazing that it costs that much for a kid to have to see some of these bands beyond an arena. I mean, thank goodness they can still go to clubs, maybe.
Mhm.
Although a lot of clubs you may not be able to get into unless it's all ages too.
Right.
If we're talking about teenagers here, yeah, it's very unfortunate, and also, media, albums. Um, I feel like I'm paying another $5 or $10 per album these days. I've always felt like I'd never pay more than, I like to pay about $25 maybe. That's including tax. But now I'm probably starting to pay more like 30. And of course, if you buy, something like the new Megadeth album, that's a double record, it might be $50 or more. And man, that's a big chunk of money, especially for teenagers.
Right. And that's exactly what my next point was going to be. Seeing bands releasing, vinyl once again, seeing bands releasing now cassettes. Again, something that we talked about a few days ago. Iron Maiden re-releasing Number of the Beast on cassette, and it being
that was you that mentioned that. $25.
Yeah. And thinking that I wouldn't have paid that much for a CD. Thinking that I was running out and making sure that I was buying the CD first week it came out because it was going to be $9.99. Previous to that, cassette tapes and vinyls back in the day, $5.99, jumped to $7.99, jumped to $9.99, and then it just went into the upper stratosphere after that. I remember seeing CDs that were on sale at Tower Records for $22.99. and thinking that's not a sale, and thinking that they were complaining about, oh well, people are now going to Walmart and Target and buying this, and thinking, yeah, I sure as shit am, because I'm gonna get that CD first week it comes out for $7.99 with 2 bonus tracks or with a sticker or with a t-shirt. I'm not paying $22.99. So when a Tower Records went out of business with those prices, I didn't feel bad about it at all, because I thought I'm going to go with the place that's giving me something that I can afford. And there are a few record shops that I'm going to visit when I'm back in the States, but I think that they've maintained their legacy, being able to stay alive, because they've been able to compete in the market and offer certain things that other places couldn't, and still keep reasonable prices for new things.
Yeah. Most of the record stores seem to be a mix of new and selling used stuff. You can sell so much used vinyl now that almost helps, drive the newer sales too, I think, because people are coming in there to buy. Like me, I go by, look at all the used records every week, and then when a new record comes out, like that Kerry King album, I'll let them know to order me a copy of that, pick that up here and there.
Right.
But I spend most of my money on the used stuff, or have been. I've almost bought everything that I need by now.
Yeah, I was big on that with CDs. I would go from one used CD shop to another, because I didn't care it was used if it still sounded
Yeah,
good.
me neither.
And even still, I would remember there was a place close to where I lived that had a bin that had CDs for $2.99. Well, what's wrong with this? Well, it was David Lee Roth, See 'Em and Smile. Well, the CD's fine, but the jewel case is broken. Oh, well, I can
Yeah,
replace the
you can
jewel case.
replace that.
Yeah. Or I remember getting Down's Nola on CD for the first time. They said, well, it's got 2 scratches on it. I go, does it play? Yeah, it plays fine. Okay, I don't give a
Mhm.
shit. It's got a scratch on the bottom. I'm not looking at it, so long
Yeah,
as it plays, that's what I want.
that's right.
So
But yeah, I think that's the way some of these record stores, like you're mentioning, that's how they get along. A lot of their sales are coming from selling used stuff,
right.
not just vinyl. It can be used clothing and buttons and posters and every little trinket you can think of.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. With when it comes to streaming services, so I know you've got a lot of physical content. Do you
Hmm.
use any streaming service?
Yeah, I use the Apple Music,
Okay.
which is 11 or 10.99 a month, I guess.
Mhm.
Now I started using the iTunes Match. Do you remember that? What
Yes.
that was? That would allow you to upload your collection into their cloud service for
Mhm.
$25 a month. And then that was merged in with Apple Music and went to that monthly subscription. And so that's kind of how I check out all the new stuff without having to, work too hard to hear it. So, and you can plug it into the car and, with your iPhone, have it everywhere you go. So, and then anything that I want to, so it's like a mix. It's a combination of the iTunes Match and Apple Music. You can listen to anything in their library, and then you can also upload your own CDs
Right.
there. Now, I had my own home media server. I use that Plex Media
Right.
program. You've probably heard of that. And so I've got all my movies and CDs, ripped, uncompressed to a Linux server in my closet. And then I can listen to, anything I want to anywhere I go. And then I use the Apple Music to hear all the new stuff.
Mhm.
So that keeps me, abreast of everything that's new. Lets me know what I might like to buy.
Okay. Cool. And
Then I know they're not getting much, but at least I'm paying something for it.
right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I like you, if there's something that I find that I really enjoy, I go out of my way to pick it up, and that's the way that I try to support the
Yeah.
artist. Um,
I do plenty of that.
yeah.
We're talking about spending all that money. It's like I've got, my old bands that I growing up with, like Believer here. I told you I went and bought all these new versions of these. That probably cost $100. And then one of my other favorite bands, Living Sacrifice. They were in the '90s and had no vinyl, but
Mhm.
now they've got everything. So I probably spent $200 to $300 on all of that. But that'll be with me until I die.
Right.
It's I with especially my old age, I start to forget the shows that I've seen. But at least I've got that album that I can keep with me forever. So that's it. That feels like a better investment, even though it's a big chunk of money.
Right. Well, my next question is what do you think about kids sticking to streaming and not wanting physical media? Do you feel that the
Hmm.
prices are pricing kids out of wanting to pick up physical media? And that's why they're going with streaming. Also, I mean, sure, the streaming is whatever, 10.99, 9.99, whatever it is, depending on the service.
Yeah.
It still ends up being a lot cheaper than them going out and picking up an album a week or a month, based on
Yeah.
something that
Although that has been changing.
okay.
Um, I frequently, especially if I go to the local record store that I go to on Saturdays, or anytime on the weekends, it's very frequent now. I'll see teenagers in there.
Okay.
A lot of times coming in with their parents. And I saw a girl there last year buying, Too Fast for Love and things like that she had found in the used bin.
Right.
And I have a niece who's she's 16 now, but she's got a record player and some albums. And I bought her a album for Christmas by TV Girl. Have you heard of them before? But a lot of the kids that I'm coming across are appreciating not only the music but the mediums that we use, and are starting to collect and just understand the value of having that.
Right.
Of course, it's streaming is always going to be the thing that most people do, and it really is unfortunate that the artist gets so little money from that. I think that I wish that could change.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about my kids and how they're into, for the most part, they like rock music. They like other stuff as well. But
Mm-hmm.
for them, they enjoy collecting CDs. And one of the things that
Yeah.
they did this year was whenever they got a B or above, they got a CD.
Yeah.
For getting a good grade. And there were a pile of CDs that I'd bought. I mean, I didn't spend a whole heck of a lot on them.
Uh-huh.
And they were thrilled. My youngest son got 72 Seasons by Metallica this way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's his go-to album to listen to every night before he goes to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's cool, man.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all very exciting to me. I every time I see these kids, I always have to bug them and talk to them a bit to find out, how is it they're interested in these same things that you and I are, and
Right.
And you can see the joy on their parents' faces too.
Mhm.
They're having those moments with their kids, buying those records for them.
Yeah.
It's neat to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking from my own personal experience, it's always a thrill to go into
Mm-hmm.
these places and to different record shops and seeing them want to pick stuff out.
That's right.
Fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
The last thing that I wanted to bring up on this topic, we've talked about instruments. You've got a few guitars behind you. Could you imagine as a kid being told that if you wanted to get a decent guitar that you had to pay $3,000 for a Les Paul, let's say?
No, man. Can you imagine how long on my first job, Kentucky Fried Chicken, $3.15. At some point, I got a raise, a 10-cent raise. And how many hours would I have to work to buy a $3,000 guitar?
Yeah, that's crazy.
My first guitar was an Odessa or Odessa. I don't know how to say that properly, but it was a Les Paul copy, with like a orange burst paint job.
Right.
I got it for $100 from some guy locally. But then after that, I started eyeing a JB player.
Okay.
Do you remember those guitars?
Yeah, I remember them.
Yeah, they were, all the ones I saw were white, and they're just really cool looking guitar. That was probably more like $300, and I remember saving up the money to buy that. And then I had to buy an amplifier, which I went and got a stupid, super high interest loan to buy a crate amplifier for like $700. And I was a stupid kid, had no clue what I was doing. And I probably paid for that 3-4 times over, maybe in interest payments. But
right.
And actually my very first amp was a tiny little Fender amp with like a small, 9-inch speaker in there that my mom got for $25.
Right.
But But yeah, I mean, and you could still buy some expensive guitars back then, but gosh, boy, they've gone way up now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the most expensive one you have there in your room?
Most expensive that I have cost me about 1,000.
Yeah. And what is it?
It's a Paul Gilbert Fireman. It's the first one that he released, which is the finish is reminiscent of your classic SG finish.
Uh-huh.
That's the most expensive. I have a few other Ibanez that I've paid 7 something for. An Ibanez bass that I paid about 7 for. The other Fireman that I bought after that, after paying import fees and everything, was about 700. That's about the most expensive. The electronic drum set I have next to me, that was about 1,300. That's probably the most expensive piece of musical equipment that I've purchased.
Yeah.
But it's a similar deal. I remember somebody seeing the drum set and saying, "Oh, I got to pick one of those up for my kid." I'm like, they're not cheap.
Yeah, that's right.
You get one of those for like 100 and something. I'm like, no, like this is 1,300. It sounds like a real drum set. It sounds like an acoustic drum set.
Yeah, that's something else I would much rather buy used. I don't need to pay full retail for something like that.
Right. So I think to summarize this discussion, economics play a big part in, I think, keeping hard rock and metal alive, music in general alive, because we talked about Black Keys and Jennifer Lopez as well.
Do you ever think we talk about Jennifer Lopez on your show?
No, not at all. But it was the biggest example. So in the perfect,
it sure is, yeah.
And the thing there too is that you still have other big pop artists that are going out and not having problems selling tours. You know, Taylor Swift, of course, Beyonce. You have Madonna, who's playing smaller venues, not playing big stadiums like the other two that I mentioned. J-Lo just it's just not what it used to be. And I've even seen members of, for example, I think it was Redman from Wu-Tang Clan, who said that they're having a hard time connecting with younger kids, and that's why they feel that a lot of their tickets aren't selling as well. So
yeah,
I think money ultimately comes into that. Is if a kid can afford to buy your music, it's going to be more likely that they give it a shot. So
that's right. That's one of the big problems I think they're going to have is, I mean, how are they going to grow those audiences at those prices?
Yeah. Agreed.
That's a good way to sum that up, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So what we're going to do, I didn't think this discussion would go this long, but we've kind of done like an hour with this.
Yeah, we sure have.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this discussion to bed. And we may have another discussion in the future, Ed and myself. And I want to thank Ed for hopping on here and joining me and discussing this. And
I enjoyed it.
Awesome. So on that note, thank you to everyone who is watching the replay of this or listening to the audio version. Appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time right here on Signals for Mars. See you, folks.
Thank you for watching the Signals from Mars live stream. You can watch the show live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, or check out replays on YouTube. Go to signalsfrommars.com for more information. This concludes our show.